something very inappropriate. Oh, I've got a microphone so I can whisper. The sound guy, so I'm preparing and my feet are on the ground and I'm like prepping myself. And the sound guy who's just hooked me up with a microphone leans forward and says, "Can I turn you on?" And it's like, now's not a good time. Thank you, maybe later. Hello, nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. I hope you have enjoyed your day. I must first ask for forgiveness. I'm used to being facilitator, so I'm used to asking questions. So if in the middle of nowhere I suddenly say, "How are you?" please just say, "No, keep talking, keep talking." Okay, how does that sound? No, keep talking, no, keep talking. I tricked you and you failed. How does that sound? Thanks very much. So unfortunately, I didn't invent a very amazing technological thing that's going to change the world, and I'm very embarrassed about it. And I also haven't invented the future, and that's embarrassing. I didn't make anything, I haven't discovered anything, and so I should probably go home. Thank you for coming. But there is one, they keep talking, thank you. There is one thing, however, that I have brought with me, and I hope that's okay, and I'd like to show it to you. Is that okay? Keep talking. So the only problem with what I've brought with me is that it's completely invisible. So you have to imagine it. Is that okay? Okay, so imagine it over here. It is the biggest thing you've ever seen, but picture it's the biggest thing you've ever seen over here, like this. And it's the most powerful thing you've ever seen. Over here, like this. Can you imagine it? And it is completely and utterly golden. Sounds nice? Isn't it beautiful? It's mine, and it is my heart. And when I look at you, thank you, I got an R. And the most beautiful and the most powerful thing is my heart. And the most beautiful thing and the most powerful thing is your heart. And so thank you for bringing yours. I can see yours. They are beautiful and they are golden. And so today, I have an opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, which is not to talk about knowledge that you learn, that you read in encyclopedias, but knowledge that is yours, that is within yours. And in this beautiful, golden, massive thing that is yours, that belongs to you and you and you and you and me, but it's mine, this one, that you have all of the knowledge in all the universe stored right beautifully in this golden thing inside you of your heart. That okay? Okay. So I haven't always been so optimistic. I was born to two very beautiful parents and a completely wonderful brother. And externally, I had many luxuries. So I had love, and I had an education, and I had opportunities, and I was very lucky. But inside, I was very, very scared. And I'm not sure if any of you were very, very scared when you were younger, but I was very scared. And I was so scared of death that my dad, who was a doctor, ironically, would come home, and he thought it was the most wonderful thing to talk about his day. He's English. I'm not actually putting on a bad accent. It's perfect. He thought he would talk about his day and about who had died, and I had an unfortunate physical reaction, and I vomited. Every time I heard about death, I would vomit. It's very, very inconvenient when you watch the news and when you listen to your dad, who is a doctor. I don't recommend. And so very scared of death, and also very scared of the dark, and my brother, who will kill me for saying this, I used to wake him up in the middle of the night to walk me to the bathroom in the dark because I was so scared of the dark. That was up until like last year. Don't know why you're laughing. No, until I was about 10 or 11. And so very, very fearful, but also very, very sensitive. I was so sensitive that I remember being a 3-year-old in pre-primary school, I'm not sure what it's called, creche or kindergarten, and I remember a little girl walking in, and she was blonde, and she had this beautiful pale skin, and she walked in, and her pale skin was very, very rosy, and she was crying. And she only started crying as she walked in, and as she walked in, I started crying because she was crying. And I thought, now that's interesting. As a 3-year-old, that's what I thought. Now that's interesting. I was a very mature 3-year-old. Isn't it funny that she is crying, and because she is crying, I'm crying. I'm not sad. I don't even know why she's crying, but I love her. That was my conversation in my head as a 3-year-old. So I was a sensitive and I was a fearful child, and I had very big eyes and very fuzzy hair. Not that much has changed. And I went through the world for many, many years being very scared and feeling very inadequate, like everyone around me was smarter and funnier and brighter and better and faster and more brilliant. I'm not sure if anyone else in the world has ever felt inadequate. It doesn't feel so good. And then one day, I was about 11, and I watched a television program, and it was this big television program of survival stories, and my mum was like, "Don't worry, nobody died. You can watch without being sick." It's very exciting. I used to have to watch Murder, She Wrote halfway through because I couldn't watch the murder part. It's funny, but it's true. And so I watched this program, and it was survival stories, and there were 12 stories of these people who'd been through extraordinary travesties in their life, and they'd survived horrific things like ladders. I suddenly got paranoid, there was a ladder behind me. Like ladders falling on their heads or nails through their eyes and terrible things where they'd almost died, but none of them did. They all survived, and it was all miraculous survival. And they were all interviewed after their awakening the next day when they were recovered, and they were all interviewed about what was different before and after. And there was something very interesting about the before and after, because after, they all decided to live their lives differently. They all decided to spend more time with their family, tell people how much they loved them, do what they were really passionate about, find the jobs that they wanted, live according to what was in their heart. And I was 11, and I was like, well, why did you have to almost die? What an incredible waste of almost dying. Why didn't you do all of that before? So, as an 11-year-old, I was like, I don't want to have to almost die. I want to make sure that I take all of their advice. I'm 11, and I will follow it. And the thing that was common in all of their awakenings was that they had been living something called a should life. I should marry this person, I should get this job, I should be like this, I should talk like this, I should do this. And it was shoulds created by society, created by family, by friends, by not their hearts. And so I thought, well, I better follow my heart. And I better listen to my heart. My beautiful mom, who listens to her heart flawlessly, said, listen to your heart. So I sat down, and I was like, okay, I'm listening. I'm listening. But it doesn't say anything. And I was like, oh no, maybe I should follow my gut instead. And so I changed my diet. And I listened to that. It was much noisier, but it didn't say anything wise. And so this idea of following my heart was very exciting for me, but I didn't know what on earth that could possibly mean. What is my heart saying? How do I know? How do I find out? Where do I find the books to say what is in my heart so I can follow it like everybody's saying? And then one day, I have another little story. I was about to participate in the sports relay race. Very, very exciting for all of you people in the audience who are sporty. Die. Some of us were not athletically gifted. And also, not only were they not athletically gifted, they were on the slowest team that everybody knew was the slowest team. Heartbreaking at the beginning of a relay when I was the fastest on the team, and that doesn't say very much. So I'm going to run last because it is my relay, and the fastest must run last. It's exciting because we all knew we were going to lose. So my team's very disheartened. Everybody else is like, ha ha ha, we'll walk this, ha ha ha. And the gun goes off, and the first person starts running, and they pass the baton, and the second person, they pass the baton, and the third person, and they run past me, and I'm waiting to catch my baton, and my team's still hopping along, very, very slow. Some of them ran awkwardly. And by the time I got the baton in my hands, and I had my first sprint, the 3 teams finished. And that's quite embarrassing to not even have a chance to run. And so I sprinted. And then halfway through my sprint, I'm like, why am I running? What am I running for? And 3 people finish the race. I'm sprinting on my own. Everybody's watching me, and they're like, this is so embarrassing. And I'm like, this is so embarrassing. And so in the middle of my sprint, I'm like, I'm going to make the most of the situation. And I had that song, that victory song, dun, 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 and I turned my sprint into a slow motion. Dun, 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 dun. And I slow motioned a victory, and I ran past the audience. I'm so embarrassed. Some of them might still remember this. And I was like this. And then the audience was like, what's happening? And they got on their feet, and they cheered, and I'm like, and my team was cheering, and they forgot that they lost. And I crossed the finish line with arms up and everybody cheering, and didn't win any medals, obviously. But everybody was laughing, and everyone was happy, and the team was okay. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I did something that helped those people, and they felt better. And the crowd or the audience had fun, and I felt good. And then for the first time, I was like, was that you, Heart? Yes, it was. And that experience of that complete sense of feeling alive led me to the work that I'm doing today, where I'm very lucky I get to travel and I get to work with extraordinary human beings in extraordinary positions so that every action they do can uplift those around them. And I work in the world of leadership, and leadership is, for me, the idea of service and kindness, and that in every moment that we are kind, we are leading. And imagine if we were all leaders and we were all kind. And in my travels, working with hundreds of people, extraordinary people, I stumbled across the greatest act of leadership I had ever seen. And it was right in front of me, and the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. And I'm going to tell you the story briefly, okay? Okay. So it was February 2011, 2 years ago. And I was about to start a project called the Joy Experiment, a crazy idea to get a group of creatives together living for a week and see who kills each other first. And the morning the Joy Experiment started, I got a phone call. I was in England. I got a phone call from my mom telling me that her dad had passed away. And it was very sad, but he'd been sick for a while, but it was okay. It was okay. Grandpa has passed away. That's okay. So I said, let me get on a plane. I'm coming right away. And my mom and my grand said, no, stay. He'd love to think that you've done that. He'd love to think that you were doing something ridiculous called the Joy Experiment. So I ran the Joy Experiment and then flew home straight away because I wanted to be with my mom and my grandmother. My granny, this is her ring, cheeky as anything and feisty and brilliant and smart and bright and wise and all those things. I was most worried about her. And I spent 3 extraordinary weeks with my gran, and we laughed and we reminisced and we drove and we had the best time. And then I went to visit one Thursday morning, and the door was open. And for those of you who've ever arrived to an open door, it's similar to getting a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's the thing that when you know, when this beautiful golden thing, it knows. And my mum was standing there in the doorway, and she just looked at me, and she tilted her head, and she said, how do you know? And it turned out that my gran had had a very, very bad stroke and was unconscious. And my mom, imagine if a tap turned on very quickly and then off very quickly. My mom let out a moment of crying, and then it stopped. And seeing her mother on the ground, my mom went, okay, this is what's happened. Okay. And it was the bravest, most courageous thing I'd ever seen. And for 7 days, my mum and I lived with my gran by her side, holding her hand, waiting for her to become again. And she did for a moment, and she went again. And a week later, I got a phone call to say I was just out for a moment, and they said, come back, it's time. And the nurse looked at my mum and I, and she said, it's time. And I went to one side of my gran, and my mum on the other side. And for those of you who've ever watched somebody die before, death is a beautiful thing. I didn't need to vomit for all of those years. And death is like this beautiful wave that travels up the feet of a body, and it travels all the way up. And I was holding my gran's arms, and I was watching death arrive from feet up. And I felt as this beautiful, cool, I suppose, other thing went through my arms and through her and into her head, and I watched as my grandmother, my beautiful, brilliant grandmother, drew her last breath. But more than that, I looked up, because I'd been watching this blue wave up her body. I looked up, and I saw my mom on the other side of my gran, and she was stroking her hair, and she whispered to her mom, she said, go play, mommy, go play. And I watched my mom watch her mom pass away. And I watched her wish with all the love and all the forgiveness and no judgment, with nothing but humility and peace in her heart, wishing her mom to go and play. And she did. She went to play. And my mom and I on the car ride home were just sitting there. And my mom was very brave. She was very She was the greatest leader I've ever seen, the deep acceptance, deep humility, deep courage. And she just looks at me, and she was driving. She goes, "You know, Yai," it's my nickname from my brother. She goes, "We're born and we die, and in between, there is just love." And I thought that that was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. And it reminded me everything I've ever needed to know, that within this thing, this massive, expansive, infinite, golden thing that you have inside you, you have all the power and all of the knowledge and all of the wisdom you'll ever need. That if you sit still and listen long enough, that you can hear everything your body and your heart is trying to whisper to you, that you can live lives that are completely aligned from the deep and uttermost power of your heart and not the great fear in your mind. And I wish you to let this thing be visible to us all, because it's completely beautiful.